Hello and welcome everyone. This is Type V3 and I too once had the urge to catch 'em all. And the Pokemon I sought after most was none other than the legendary psychic clone himself, Mewtwo. This is Bandai's D-Arts rendition of one of the franchise's most iconic characters. Initial impressions had me feeling Mewtwo looked astonishing, but after my excitement subsided, I think his general aesthetics came out good rather than great. There's no doubt that the proportions are spot on, and the sculpting, while minimal, remains faithful to the original design from 1996. However, sections like his fingers appear incredibly disjointed, and certain edges, like the top of his waist, just came out looking rough. Also, at 5 inches tall, Mewtwo's a little shorter than I expected. On the other hand, I found the paintwork to be mostly great, and any complaints I have with it stem from personal preference rather than technical faults. Mewtwo's body is slightly too purple, and because of this, it tends to drown out all the fantastic airbrush detail found in his edges and joints. The head sculpt may be simple, but Bandai really nailed Mewtwo's omnipotent expression. Interestingly, the original seam lines from the plastic used has been filled in and then painted over. It's a great idea, yet flawed in execution here. You can still see remnants of these imperfections from certain angles. Let's see how Mewtwo moves. His neck has 2 ball joints at the bottom and one at the top of the neck, so super emotive. And if you're wondering how this piece follows, it's a soft piece of plastic that's not really attached on anything, so it kind of just goes in and out of his neck depending on where you move it, or his head, so really neat. Upper torso, very, very great in its range. Lower torso, not so much. You can't even move side to side, just the upper torso. The shoulders are interesting. They are ball joints, and technically they should be good, but they are just the stiffest things in the world to move. And it's not because the socket and the ball are tight, it's because his actual shoulder, the way it's designed, it just doesn't really allow for that much movement. Like, the in and out is great, but if you try and move it forward, it is just so tough to move, and more often than not, you rip the bicep swivel out. I don't know why this wasn't looked upon in the final pass or just before this figure's release, but it's kind of annoying. Double jointed elbow, ball jointed wrist, and all the fingers are fully ball jointed, so they're pretty cool. I mean, they do look kind of weird, but whatever. The hips, they have the Figuarts style hips where you pull them down to get for more range so you can accommodate wide-legged stances. Again, you can use them, but they do leave sort of gaps there, so it's kind of weird. His reverse knee is a universal joint, so it's a nice swivel there. And then his ankle is a ball joint, but you can really only get it to tilt, so that's kind of it. The amazing piece of articulation on this figure is the tail. These are all segmented ball joints, and they can all move in any direction you'd like, so you can do some really cool tail poses. Unfortunately, because of Mewtwo's design, he can't actually stand on his own, especially with these feet, so you always have to use this tail as sort of like a tripod, and that means half the cool poses you want to do with the tail are, well, neglected. You can't really get to them because if you, say, want the tail up behind him, well, he won't be able to stand. He'll just lean back, and that's a bit of a, I don't know how I feel about it. Like, it just sucks that you can't do that. And then, of course, there's his shoulders, which are weak, and this torso, or not torso, but the waist, I almost kind of wish they just didn't include it. It would have made for a nicer sculpt, and there's enough range in the upper ab crunch there, so, I don't know. I mean, he carries all the main points, it's just, you struggle getting to use all of them. Unsurprisingly, Mewtwo comes with very few accessories. You get a single swappable hand that has a post mounted in its palm, and of course the included Shadow Ball effect part that can be placed on top of it. Yes, the effect part looks great. The violet to blue gradient on the translucent plastic is appealing, and the asymmetrical detailing keeps things from being too boring. Nevertheless, the whole thing is flat. Literally. What should have been a spherical ball came out as a deflated balloon. Basically, this accessory only works from specific angles, and more often than not, comes off as being silly. Mewtwo comes with his own display stand. At its core, it's essentially a Tamashii stage Act 4, with the base being heavily inspired by the original Pokeball design. For something so simple, I was surprised at how much I ended up liking it. It also has 4 mounting points for the stage arm, though in my experience, I was never confident in the arm's grip around the figure. Finally, the first run of every D-Arts Mewtwo came with a special bonus in the form of Pokemon's 151st character, Mew. It's a very small, non-posable figurine that can be mounted on its own display arm alongside Mewtwo. There's not really much to say about it. The paint and sculpt are minimal, and it definitely feels more like a neat bonus as opposed to a sought-after extra. Though, as I say that, I wouldn't be shocked if for some this became the sole reason to pick up the entire set. Now, I had a lot of expectations from Bandai's D-Arts Mewtwo, especially since it marks the start of fully posable Pokemon figures. Visually, he just about gets it right, the articulation hits all the major points, and while the bulk of the accessories are a mixed bag, the display stand sure is nice. This is a solid figure, and for the most part my expectations were met. But then, I guess that in and of itself is the real issue. My expectations were never exceeded. Moreover, he just isn't that impressive of a toy to begin with. In fact, Mewtwo carries that one single trait that's worse than being an outright bad toy altogether. He's boring. Apart from hitting your sense of nostalgia every now and then, he offers nothing interesting and quickly becomes forgettable. At a retail price of $40, Mewtwo comes with about enough to justify the premium cost. I certainly wouldn't recommend against picking up this set, but then again, I also wouldn't encourage it. Unless you're a fan of the character or are a huge Pokemaniac, this is one to pass. Anyways, this has been Type V3. Thanks for watching, and just as a side note, Mewtwo's character design was one that I thought would make for a great transition into figure form. But after this experience, I'm suddenly a lot less excited for the upcoming Charizard, Blastoise, and Venusaur D-Arts releases.